believe, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And to be honest with you, Roxanne, I am very much behind on our Christmas gifts. So right after the show, after we write our inspirational message, I might have to leave to go out to the store. But anyway, enough about that. But we're just so excited that you're joining us. And, Live with the Lows is a show that marries faith and psychology to give you some really practical guidance in your own walk of faith. Roxanne and I truly believe that it's that practical Christianity that's going to help us to apply what we're learning, what we're reading, what we're living on a day-to-day basis. And so our show broadcasts every single Tuesday live from Jacksonville, Florida, from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So before we dive into tonight's important topic, and I hope that you as parents, along with your children, are present. Before we go into that topic, I really want to encourage all of you to stay connected to us through our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, all under the headings of The Lows. In fact, all of our sermons, if you're interested in listening to our sermons, of which every single sermon, and many of you may not be aware of, but every single sermon that I deliver, Roxanne and I collaborate on. And so those sermons are found also on right here at Ancient Faith under Healthy Souls, but also on our YouTube channel under The Lows. And our show is actually currently being broadcast live on our Facebook page under The Lows. And one of the things that we started earlier this year is sending out daily inspirational messages. Every single evening, Roxanne and I just sit down and we think of a topic that we want to kind of talk to all of you about, and we write this message that we hope encourages and inspires you. Right now, as you're listening to our show, we encourage you, if you are not receiving our daily inspirational messages, go to our website at thelows.com. That's Louhs, thelows.com. Click on that subscribe button and then simply put in your email address. And tomorrow morning when you wake up, and there's going to be a daily inspirational message from us. And if you love those messages, and we already have thousands of people that do receive them every day, which we're so excited about, do us a favor. Help us to share Christ's light, share them with your friends and family, and invite them also to become part of our Lows family. And finally, I know there's just a few days left before Christmas, and if you're looking for a great Christmas gift, we encourage you to, explore our book, Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan that's found right here on Ancient Faith. They are our publisher. We are actually in our second printing of this book, and we're so excited about it. And if you're really looking for some renewal in your own walk of faith, definitely consider this. We also have the Audible version of this book, which is recorded in our own voices, Roxanne and my voice, and you can find that at audible.com. And finally, Ancient Faith is hosting a marriage retreat February 18th to the 20th at the Antiochian Village in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. In fact, the retreat is entitled Making Over Your Marriage. So many marriages right now are struggling. And for many of us, we oftentimes simply just put Band-Aids on a marriage, just hoping that in time things will get better. And maybe you're one of those people that just needs some renewal in your marriage. There's only a few, this is going very fast, by the way, but there's only a few rooms spaces that are still available for this particular retreat. If you are interested in attending a retreat that Roxanne and I are both speaking at, we've got an enormous and an amazing retreat planned for you on personality tests and how you can love your spouse better, how do you deal with conflict, all these different things we will cover. You don't want to miss out on this retreat. You can go right now to store.ancientfaith.com/events. That's store.ancientfaith.com/events. So let's get started. We would love to have you engage in tonight's conversation. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. Friends, tonight we're going to speak to you about how technology is impacting our children. I'm not too sure if you're aware of this, but technology has advanced so much in the last 20 years. In fact, it's advanced more in the last 20 years than in the last 200 years. Our children right now have access to information that the generation prior to them never had access to, all at the tip of their fingers. No longer are the days where you would just simply have one television in a home with just a few channels, but now you have multiple televisions in a home with thousands of channels. No longer do we simply just have one channel that we're looking at or a typewriter, but now we have tablets, smartphones, computers, iPads, all of which are impacting our youth and all that are providing information that are definitely impacting our children emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. Check this out. Research shows that the average child is watching or has access to technology or utilizing technology, better yet, between 8 to 10 hours per day. That's for an average of an 8 to 10-year-old. When you start getting into adolescence, that number increases. The time adds up. How is all of this technology truly impacting our children? Is there a link between all the technology that we're seeing within our children, this record number of technology that people have access to the record number of insecurities that we're seeing with our young children, how we're seeing with cyberbullying? Or how can our technology be used in a positive way? To answer these questions and so much more, we're so glad to welcome back our dear friend and clinical psychologist, Dr. Randa Anderson. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She's completed her PhD in psychology from the University of Psychology and her clinical psychology training at the University of Chicago's Hospital and Michael Reese Medical Center. She feels very passionate about integrating concepts from psychology and orthodoxy, things that are very passionate to us as well, in ways that can be practically applied to everyday life. She is the president of the Orthodox Christian Association of Medicine, Psychology, and Religion, called OCAMPR, and she's also married and has 2 young adult sons. Dr. Anderson, as always, welcome back to Live with the Louhs.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be back. I appreciate you welcoming me.
Oh, absolutely.
So, Dr. Anderson, when we talked a few weeks back about the impact of technology on just people as a whole, on our health, our wellness, for us as adults, we started by talking about the positive aspects of tech use. So let's start there tonight, too. I mean, we talk about technology in kids. It's not all bad, right? This sort of rapid firing shift we're seeing in brains. I mean, this has got to have some sort of helpful creative abilities for us later on in jobs. And, we have access to all sorts of information. Talk to us about kind of the positives here about technology being so available to kids.
Sure. I will say that the question is harder to answer for children than for adults in terms of all the things that are positive about it. But there are some benefits. And I asked this question to a group of high school seniors I was presenting to last summer, and they shared with me all of their favorite apps and websites. There were obvious ones like Instagram and TikTok, but they also shared with me some useful apps that they use for creativity, for communication, and for productivity. There were plenty of them I had never even heard of. And I was really impressed with the myriad of apps they were using to do things that really mattered to them, not just for entertainment. So there is some personal growth, connection, and creative expression that can be experienced through technology. And, young people are using websites like Discord to play games or even watch movies together online with their friends. And that can be a positive social experience. And especially during the pandemic, this has been a way for young people to stay connected to their friends. What's also interesting is that teens are using social media to advocate for causes they want to support.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but I sure have. In the last year in particular, I've seen young people posting on social media support for all sorts of causes they believe in. And youth are also going online to find health information. A Common Sense Media report found that 8 in 10 young people have gone online to look for health information on a wide variety of topics. And nearly 7 in 10 have actually used mobile apps related to health issues for things like fitness, dealing with anxiety, stress, depression. So they're using apps to improve their health. I also see youth ministers using social media to reach out to kids they serve in fun ways that can motivate them to attend in-person events. Now, note I'm talking about the positive for teens. I have less to say about positives for elementary school children, because I think children need direct social interaction with family and friends first and foremost. And I think good old-fashioned activities like Legos and board games and sports, music, all these are healthier activities for children than hours and hours with the iPad for a lot of reasons that we'll talk about tonight.
Well, and I was just going to kind of build on that. So often, I think, Roxanne, we were at a restaurant, I think it was maybe about a month ago, and when we were watching the people, it seemed like every single person that was around that table was using their cell phones. They were just kind of texting and engaging. And, what are you seeing as far as, I know we recognize that we're seeing a lot of our youth and adolescents especially that are simply just communicating through text messaging. What can you kind of share with just the parents that are listening as well as the youth that may be tuning in as well? What are some of the drawbacks to obviously communicating that way, and how is it really impacting our ability, our interpersonal skills that we're having?
Yeah, well, I do think that there's an impact on social skills for sure. Certainly socializing on social media is very different than in real life. People say things on social media that they would never say face to face, but also there are subtle nonverbal cues that are non-existent in a Snapchat or a text. So that often leads to conflict because people make assumptions about a tone that they're reading in a text that may or may not be there. So there's that. And I actually have had young people say to me that after a year of doing everything online, they suddenly have felt very inadequate about going out in the real world and having real conversations with people. I actually had a college student tell me that he suddenly felt like his social skills were just stunted. And if a young adult who was previously socially competent can feel that way after being online for 1 year, imagine what happens if a child from a young preschool age spends much of their social time online. There's some development that does not happen.
It's just so fascinating. I found myself saying to the kids, do you remember card catalogs? When you wanted to find information, you had to go to the library. We had encyclopedias, right? You had to open it up, or in a library you had to go to a card catalog. And I was explaining this very foreign idea to the kids, and they were literally blown away that that's how long it took to gain access to information that we needed. And now, and I do see the plus and minus side, right? Because the other day we're riding on an airplane and there's a movie that's coming on, and I see my son's watching a movie, and I'm like, hey, how do you know that movie's appropriate? And he literally said, I just checked it out on Common Sense Media. I'm like, great. Hey, that's great. Thumbs up. This is great. We already know how much, sex, drugs, and violence is in the movie, how many stars, and what the kids say. Right. So, and I think back to what we had zero access to that. We'd be watching a movie and the parents had to jump up and change the channel if something was coming up. So, it's just such a interesting, I really see the kind of plus and minus, but here I am talking to a young girl the other day, probably she was 10th or 11th grade. I can't remember. And she literally told me, I am having the hardest time studying for my exams. And and I said, why? And she said, well, I just I'm so distracted by my phone. I said, what are you most distracted by? She says, well, Snapchat and TikTok. Those are the two that I said, get on your phone right now. Tell me your screen time. It was about probably 2:30 in the afternoon. Get on your phone right now. Tell me your screen time. She was at 6.5 hours. Yeah. And I said, okay. I said, well, sometimes there's entertainment, there's music, there's this. I said, you're probably looking for other things. She says, nope, the entire 6.5 was literally just Snapchat and TikTok. Yep. And I said, I can completely see how that happened though, right? Because I said, these things are literally, as you discussed last time, designed to keep kids pulled in, but they feel like they want to change it and they can't, So you've got this sort of upside of Common Sense Media and being able to research and have information at our fingertips where we used to have to go to the library. But then you also have this struggle of the apps that were designed to make you fail. What would you say? Yeah, right. What do you say to these kids? Hey, it's not your fault. It was set up this way.
Yeah. So that same group of high school seniors that I just mentioned, recognized also that although they have all these apps that they use that are really great, they recognize as well that it's a problem. and they don't know how to fix it. And so we spent time talking about that. And the first thing I did, this was a presentation, obviously, by the way, at a camp. And the first thing I did was explain to them how our technology is designed to entice us, that millions upon millions of research dollars have gone into exactly how to make the app so that we will use it more. And they really are fighting an uphill battle. And I do think that empathy rather than judgment helps kids and teenagers and adults too recognize that it is problematic. It isn't all their fault. It's been designed that way, and that they're going to have to work at it to change the habit for sure.
So let's talk about, we're listening to Live with the Louhs right here. For those of you who are just tuning in, we're speaking with Dr. Randa Anderson, and we'd love for you. I know you have questions as parents. I know you're struggling with this. We all are. We can empathize, but we want you to join the conversation. Give us a call at 855-237-2346. You can also email us a question right here during the show at ask@ancientfaith.com. We're also screening the live show on Facebook. So speaking of technology, we have multiple ways to access you.
Absolutely.
But what are the problematic aspects of tech use? Let's dig into that just a little bit for all those concerned parents who are saying, we are struggling, we are worried. Let's talk about the problematic aspects of technology use for kids right now.
Sure. So unfortunately, I have a very long list to share with you, and they do cross every aspect of kids' health and development: physical, social, emotional, cognitive. And there are even specific dangers they can encounter online that I do want to be sure to point out. I won't take the entire show on this, believe me, but the problems I'm focusing on are especially concerning because of the possible long-term effects on development over time. And there are also issues that I encounter in my practice literally every day. So the first one I want to mention is there's a physical impact of screen time on sleep. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that screens be turned off at least a half hour before bedtime. And that is because the light that emits from the screen simulates daytime and keeps the body alert and fools us into thinking it's still time to be awake. Plus, if you're doing something stimulating like playing a video game or viewing something anxiety-provoking like scrolling on social media, sleep can be disrupted. And of course, if your kid is checking the phone during the night or being awakened by alerts or messages from friends at night, then that can also cause sleep disturbance. And we know when kids don't get good rest, there's an impact on mood, academic performance, and physical health. That's true for adults too, by the way. There also can be a cognitive impact of too much tech use as well. Research finds a link between screen use and ADHD, which is ironic because we give kids computers and personal devices in schools, and we're being so advanced, but really there's a growing body of evidence that they are not good for kids' learning. And there's some harmful risks to screen time as well, such as accidental pornography exposure. The majority of kids have seen a pornographic image online by the time they're 8 to 12 years old. And certainly, if they haven't seen hardcore pornography, they are seeing soft porn and just even titillating images all the time on Snapchat and Instagram, not necessarily from their friends, but through the different discovery sections. So porn exposure obviously causes serious risk to their development of healthy sexual intimacy. That's a big topic for another time, but it is something we have to be aware of. And there's also not only exposure to pornography, but there's other disturbing content online. Did you hear about this last summer? Last summer, a man live streamed his own suicide on Facebook, and it ended up going viral on TikTok.
Wow.
So while Facebook was able to take it down immediately, it was a real problem. Users on TikTok shared it, and it because of the way their technology works, it took TikTok much longer to take it down. And even after they got it down, people who still had the video were able to disguise it and continue posting it. Now, I know 10-year-olds who saw that video.
Wow.
Friends were sharing it, and you can't
disturbing.
unsee that,
Yeah.
right? And I don't mean to be alarmist or exaggerate risks, but parents have to understand that when we give our kids a device with internet access, it's almost like not that different than dropping them off unsupervised at a mall or an amusement park, or even sometimes a casino or a bar all by themselves. So that's an issue. And, of course, we've all heard about cyberbullying.
Right.
It's a thing. It really is. And, it used to be if a kid was being bullied at school, home at least could be a safe haven for them. And now that's just not the case because of social media. The bullying can happen 24/7, and it can cover far more people, in one fell swoop than just, a few minutes on a playground.
Right. And the reach that, we're seeing, that those posts that someone can, in bullying someone, they, used to have, like, when someone was bullying, obviously the victim, the person who was, on the unfortunately on the receiving end of that bullying, that may have been the presence of 2 or 3 or maybe 5 or 10 people. Now, because people are posting it on social media, and
right.
Unfortunately, things like that, the negativity spreads so much quicker than obviously the positivity. You see these young people, and we've all heard stories of young children committing suicide. committing suicide or just major struggles with depression because of how things that were posted about them that cannot be taken back. And I think that's the real concern. That's why we're really bringing this to for our listeners. That's why Roxanne and I really felt like this should be something that we talked about with all of you, because we need to be having an environment in which we as parents, and really just even as of youth that are tuning in, and youth directors and pastoral assistants who may be tuning in, to realize just how impactful our technology is and the access that our children are having, both with us present and those when we're not present, and how we create some healthy boundaries for that. We're speaking with Dr. Randa Anderson, who is the president of the Orthodox Christian Association of Medicine, Psychology, and Religion. She is a clinical psychologist. You can find out a lot about OCAMPR. That's the acronym for the Orthodox Christian Association of Medicine, Psychology, and Religion by going to their website. It's OCAMPR.org. And you can find a lot more information about what they do, the great work that they're all doing around our world, and providing a forum to talk about topics that we're talking about today. Dr. Anderson, before we kind of go to our break, I just wanted to kind of ask you a question, and maybe we can start it here and then maybe have it conclude on the other side of our break. But last time when we were on the show a couple of weeks ago, we were talking in general terms of just how technology in its vastness is impacting us both positively and negatively. And you talked about a framework for thinking about how to have a healthy balance. And I think that's what really the key is having a healthy balance in our use of tech for us as adults. Can you reiterate that healthy balance also for our children? And what's a healthy way of thinking about or framing our tech use so that we can find a moderate balance?
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate getting to reiterate what I said last time. So there's an analogy I like to share from Dr. Nicholas Kardaras, who wrote a fantastic book for parents called Glow Kids. And he suggests that we think about our tech use as consuming either digital vegetables or digital candy, right? So some tech use is like eating candy. A little bit is fine, but too much will make you sick. So a bit of time with video games and social media is okay, but hours and hours online, and before you know it, it's like your kid has eaten the entire pound of M&Ms. Now, digital vegetables are productivity apps and educational tools. Using YouTube to learn how that's consuming a digital vegetable. Using Snapchat to organize a football game on a Saturday afternoon. That's great. My friends at Faith Tree Resources just told me about a prayer app they're launching early next year called The Encounter that will not be just a prayer book, but will allow groups of people, whole parishes or youth groups, to join in prayer together through the app. So I think that's like an entire buffet of vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, do you think that language, is it a digital vegetable or is it a digital
I like that.
It's one that kids can relate to, right? Because they know that vegetables are healthy. They know that candy is okay, but it's not great. And so I think putting it in those terms, it also puts it in a framework of health as opposed to good or bad. And I think when we demonize technology, it kind of shuts down the conversation with our kids.
Right.
You know, I've had a lot of parents ask, I mean, if you're referring to digital candy, digital vegetables, what would be the appropriate amount of time to say, hey, if you're checking your screen time, this is the amount you should spend on the candy? What would you say?
Like specifically how many minutes?
Yeah, that's usually the biggest question I get.
Well, before I would give a number, I would want to know what else are they doing with their time, right? And so if it's an hour of downtime in the evening, that's fine. But I hear, I'm sure you do too, about kids who are spending basically all day Saturday online. That's not such a good idea. So I think you have to look at how they're spending their day and come up with a number together with your child. I wish I could say off the top of my head what the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends. They actually do have some numbers on their website. I can tell you it's not the 8 hours or the 6 hours you just told me about.
Yeah. No, I mean, but that's a typical, right? I mean, if you ask most kids, check your screen. And I love to ask them that right there in the moment because it's just a real time, acknowledgement of where they actually are. And it's almost eye opening for them as well, because it's not something they're always keeping an eye on. How about right before the break, could you share with our listeners, when is it okay to give their kids a device? That's a question we get all the time too. Like at what age? Right. And there's a lot of debate around this. At what age are kids to receive a phone?
Well, and I was just going to add on that, Dr. Anderson, as well, is maybe you can talk about just the social pressure that so many parents feel, when their children are either in junior high school or even in elementary school now, where all the other parents are providing providing cell phones to their children, and you're kind of like, you're trying to hold the reins, and make sure that, hey, look, let's kind of do this. But when everything around us is telling us that they should have their phones or whatever. So I think that's also a question, or at least the pressure that many parents feel during that time when trying to decide when to give a phone and when not to.
Yes. I mean, I remember standing in the grocery store talking to another parent who had already bought her 7th grade son a phone, and she was shaking her head at me and saying, you better buy him a phone or he's going to be left out. So I've been there. I've done that. And I want to address both of those concerns. And I think they're two different topics. And I definitely want to address both. How much time do we have before this break?
Well, we have we can extend it. We'll just go for a few minutes. A few more minutes, and then we can always finish at the other side of the break too as well.
Got it. Okay, so let me tackle the question about age. And I would say that about age 24 or 25, when the brain is fully developed, is the right time to give your kid a phone. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, wow, that's
we have jumped that curve.
Wow, Randa, you are a dinosaur. No, but seriously. The right age is as old as possible. And the specific answer to that question has to do with the child and where they're at developmentally and how well can they comply with limits on tech use that you set, right? So is your kid one who already has well-developed interests in other activities, sports, art, music, dance, reading? Can they entertain themselves without an electronic device? Are they focusing well in school? Do they have friends they like to play with outside of school? There's so much growth and development happening in children's bodies and minds throughout childhood. And I think personal devices can disrupt that development. So I tell parents that before they make that purchase for the first iPad or computer or phone, video game console, whatever, but they should ask themselves why they're buying it and contemplate whether that reason fits with their values. And again, it's important to try and take an objective look at where your child is developmentally and whether the device would be merely another fun form of entertainment and learning or an open invitation to problems that you're going to have to manage.
Right.
Now, I just read last week that currently 10.3 years old is the average age that a child receives their first smartphone. And to me, that is way too young.
Wow.
And because studies are showing that the trajectory of getting a phone means getting on social media younger. And the impact of that is all the problems we've already talked about. I want to add one more thing. I especially want to talk to parents of infants, toddlers, and preschoolers and ask them, beg them even, please don't hand your phone to them to keep them entertained or pacified. Keep the phone and the iPad out of sight of their little hands and eyes. Keep toys and books with you to hand them if they need a distraction or to be occupied. And remember that your smiling face is the best distraction of all. And I know it's hard work. And I empathize. I really do. I've been there. But your iPhone is not a pacifier. And working at engaging your young child in other ways will pay off in the long run. I promise it will. So again, I think it's important we don't give kids personal electronics until other skills, talents, and healthy habits are firmly established. And so that age is going to vary.
I love that advice.
Great questions. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break. On the other side of this break, we're going to ask Dr. Anderson, what are some of the biggest mistakes that parents oftentimes make when it comes to technology and their children? So stay right with us here on Live with the Louhs on Ancient Faith Radio.
Live with the Louhs with Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne will be back in a moment. Give them a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. They would love to hear from you.
Are you struggling in your walk with Christ? Do you want to rediscover your reason for living, the person you were created to be? Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan gives you the keys to unlock areas of your life that hold you back from fully experiencing the renewal and transformation God has in mind for you. Co-authored by a priest and a psychologist, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Louh, Renewing You combines principles of spiritual growth with psychological tools to help you become your best self, fully connected with God's purpose for you. To purchase this book, please go to store.ancientfaith.com. That's store.ancientfaith.com.
Back with Live with the Louhs and Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne. Do you have a question for the Louhs? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here once again is Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Live with the Louhs. We're so grateful that you're joining us on this Tuesday, December 14th evening. Before we get back to speaking with Dr. Randa Anderson about this topic of how do we navigate our children through the technology that they're being flooded with every single day? How do we deal with that? How do we guide them in the right way? But before we get back to that topic, I do want to once again remind you that if you have not received our daily inspirational messages, we send these out every single day. Right now, while you're listening to us, just go to our website at thelouhs.com. That's Louhs, thelouhs.com. Click on that subscribe button that you're going to see right there at the very top, and then simply put your email address. And there's no strings attached. All you have to do is put your email address in, and every single day, we'll give you a word of encouragement. It's just our way of kind of lifting you up and inspiring you in your own walk of faith. And as always, if you're looking for that last-minute Christmas gift, gift, we ask that you just consider purchasing our book, Renewing You, A Priest, a Psychologist, and a Plan. It basically takes 8 of the biggest topics that Roxanne and I see both as a psychologist and a priest, and tackles them from both a psychology and a faith perspective. And all of the proceeds, as many of you already know by now, all of the proceeds are going to outreach ministries. Last week a couple of weeks ago, we sent out a check to the American Cancer Society, because both of our fathers lost their lives to cancer, and this is just a way that we hope and pray that we can do our part to helping to rid this world of this disease. So once again, tonight we're talking with Dr. Randa Anderson about how technology is impacting our youth. And we talked earlier in the very beginning part of the show about how our youth are spending almost 8 to 10 hours a day on technology. Dr. Anderson, as we're encouraging our listeners to call in if they have a question at 1-855-237-2346. Again, that's 1-855-237-2346. If you have a question for Dr. Anderson about just anything regarding to how we as parents navigate and guide our youth, please feel free to do so. But Dr. Anderson, I wanted to kind of get back to something that you were saying earlier. We're all about practical Christianity, as you know, and something I know that speaks also to your heart as well. For our parents that are listening, what are some specific practical tips that you can give them for helping their kids manage their own tech use?
Great question, and I'm happy to share. I have quite a few ideas to share, actually. But I want to start by saying that as parents, we have to model appropriate usage. So I hear from kids all the time that their parents set limits on their use, but they don't do that for themselves. And children take their cues from us, and if they see us constantly online, then they'll think that's the norm. Right. Furthermore, there's actually a growing body of research on how parental screen use impacts children. And the results aren't pretty and associate excessive screen use of the parent with childhood depression and feelings of neglect, among other things. So, getting back to the question on helping kids manage tech, the limits I'm suggesting are actually for everyone in the family, actually not just the kids, and they include simple limits like no technology at the table during meal times. Set up a family tech zone in your home where all technology is docked and charged at night. Consider setting a 24-hour tech-free fast day in your home each week. Require password access to all social media accounts. Friend your kids on their social media accounts. And make them earn their devices, right? Video game consoles, cell phones, the latest computer games are a privilege and not an entitlement. And teens can be required to contribute to the monthly cell phone bill. And that doesn't have to be a monetary contribution. It can be through a specific chore. You can put all of these rules in a family technology plan or contract. And this is where you would sit down as a family and decide the rules together. And when you sit down to discuss such a plan, you involve them in making the rules, and then you get their buy-in. And a written plan you create as a family also makes it clear what is expected of them and what the consequences will be if they don't follow the plan. And then a couple other things. Teach your children and your teens that nothing is ever private on the internet. Nothing ever is private on the internet. And I think it's so important that they learn that from day one. And then one last little tip, buy your kids an alarm clock so they don't have to rely on their phones to wake them up in the morning.
Great idea. Great idea.
I love that. We actually have a caller that has called in. Karam, are you there?
Yes, I'm still there.
Yes. Welcome to Live with the Louhs. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for these programs. It's really beneficial for our families and for our kids if they are listening. So I'm asking the families to call their kids to listen also for these programs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you have a question for Dr. Anderson?
Yeah, I have some comments and ideas to change, because we can't stop the media. They need it at school for education. They need it for entertainment. It helps, So to stop it, we should generate new ideas to stop them from using these technologies. Like when the doctor, she was talking about like sitting on the table for dining or for having lunch, or and instead of telling them don't use the technology, let's start a conversation between each other. This will take their attention from their mobiles to the conversation. So we need to start find subjects that interesting for them. We can talk about technology and educate them, and they will like the subject. Plus, I think the problem starts from home, the family. Instead of getting the kids the mobile as a present, let's go back and get some games that give ideas, give them a book, and stop giving now I'm watching and noticing mothers, sometimes if the baby cry, they give him the phone. This is wrong. If you start with your baby from 6 months and 7 months, 8 months, giving him the phone, he will never be able to leave it, So this is what I have from ideas. Plus the church. The church can play a vital role in these things. If we see the Antiochian village, when the kids go there, no one uses his phone because they don't have time to use it. They are all the time busy. So we can do the same thing on the weekends, the Saturdays at our churches, and educate our kids how to read the Bible or other things, not give them games and shows like the world give them, but we give them the spiritual life that makes them make a life balance for them between digital and spiritual. Thank you.
Yes, a balance, exactly.
Thank you, Karim, for calling, and we appreciate your call. And, Dr. Anderson, I mean, maybe just speaking a little bit on to that, I think you were sharing some very practical ways, but, what Karim was sharing, are these things that, that you find would be extremely beneficial, and really just kind of building on that, the way that the church itself, what would be some areas that you said that the church itself could help to initiate those some of those things that could help our children navigate through technology? Yeah.
So, I mean, you asked me this question last time too, in terms of what does the church give us to manage our tech use? And I very quickly responded, well, the church gives us a tool, and that's fasting. And I would like to reiterate that including a digital fast with our food pass is important for everyone, not just our kids. But this time, I want to add to it. I also want to point out that really the church gives us literally everything we need to manage our tech use. And it's not just fasting. If we're raising our kids in the fullness of the faith, then we have prayer, we have almsgiving, we have repentance, we have scripture, we have worship. We literally have everything to lean on for living a healthy life and managing our tech use. And think about it. If your kids are in liturgy every week, then that's at least 2 hours of peace where everyone unplugs from our devices and plugs into Christ and his church.
I mean, I love this sort of notion of, really engaging and giving a lot of other activities. I mean, I even see something in the Facebook feed here about, and this is a kid actually writing in, there's nothing else to do. Sometimes it's too hot outside, it's too cold outside. Parents are working long hours. How do we solve this? I mean, this is, kind of mentioned some important things. I mean, we do need to be starting the conversation or handing them a book or, what would we do before the phone, before 2007? What did we do? And that takes some creativity, like thinking back. We would have started the conversation, you would have let your mind just wander. And that is often how conversations develop. You think of something rather than search for something, right? And the mind kind of takes on its sort of own meaning and own space. And I feel like that's where sort of more organic conversation is born, through two people just walking together or talking together or handing someone a book. And then you think about what you just read and wow, that just brought up a whole bunch of other stuff. So what would you say to folks who are saying, or kids who are saying, I don't really feel like there's anything else to do?
I appreciate that. And I'm so glad that young person made that comment, because I think, as parents, we have to help our kids find their thing, whatever that is. And, especially now, as we're, kids we had the last, year and a half online in a pandemic, and I'm not going to say the pandemic is over, but we are starting to do things again. And I think we have some habits to break. And the first thing I think you have to do to break the habit of all this technology is really explore with your child their interests and hobbies, and start signing them up for activities again, and help them find activities they enjoy and support those. If they're not going to play Fortnite for 10 hours, they need to replace it with something healthier. And I know a lot of times, kids will say, I don't want to, it's boring. But, they really can find things that interest them. And we have to kind of all agree not to just, fall back on, okay, fine, watch a TV show, or here's the iPad, go ahead and play Roblox. So, there really are wonderful things out there for all of us to do.
I mean, I think one thing to remember too, and for all young people listening, listen, one of the issues that, that our brain really does work against this is, dopamine is what's responsible for making us want to do something, right? In anticipation of some gratifying result or some positive, pleasurable event, it's already being released at the thought of doing something that's going to bring gratification. Well, the phone, that quick, reward that we're getting every time we see a like, or we get the information we want right away, or, we're playing that video game. There's such a flood of that it's hard to get that kind of a flood doing other things, right? I think that's something to kind of think about too. We're almost like oversatiated. So, something that requires a little bit more effort may seem like, well, that's a bore, but so I just encourage you, kids, be patient. And I, even as an adult, have to think that way. Maybe it's going to take a little bit longer, but there's something interesting that I'm going to gain from this experience as well. And new learning to take place if we just kind of bear with it. But
exactly. You're tapping into another concern with technology, is the instant gratification, right? And we know from studies that, when kids, fall for the instant gratification over time, it impacts their academic skills. Kids who can delay gratification do better in life. And, there's all kinds of data to back that up. So as parents, I'm going to reiterate what I said before, delay that technology use as long as possible, because if your kid develops an interest in art or music or sports, or just loves to sit and play Legos for hours, let them get solid in those activities. And then it's a little easier for you to say, get off the iPad and go play Legos because they already like doing those things, right? So
that's right. So what are the biggest mistakes, the parents are making when it comes to technology and our youth?
Yeah. So, there's two, and I already mentioned the one, which I think is giving the technology way too young. But the second, and I'm going to get pushback for this, so people, send the angry email to me, not to the Lowe's, because I know that during the pandemic that this was a habit that developed, and that is allowing personal devices in the bedroom. And again, I know it was necessary during the pandemic because that was the quiet place for kids to be able to do online school. But I do believe that's a habit that has to be broken. And let me tell you why. So first, we know that when teens especially have a phone in their room, they tend to stay on it late at night and lose sleep and have poor quality sleep. 36% of teens say they check their phones during the middle of the night. And as I said earlier, poor sleep leads to a variety of problems, including depression. Second, Obviously, devices in the room mean you can't monitor what they are doing. And again, accidental pornography or other inappropriate content exposure will happen. Or maybe they're being cyberbullied or feeling just anxious and terribly isolated and alone. And of course, these things can happen in the family room or the kitchen, but the likelihood of you or another family member being there when it happens is greater. And you can help them talk about and process the situation, right? You also need to be aware of kids interacting with people they do not know in real life through games and social media online. And I often remind parents that if their kid has a device with internet access in their room, then the parents simply do not know who else is in the room with their child. And you have a better shot of knowing who they're interacting with online if they're using their device in a common area of the home.
Right. And what they're sending, what they're doing, what they're saying.
Exactly. And last, even if your child or teen isn't doing anything problematic, and most of the time they're not, just doing homework, texting with friends, watching cute cat videos, whatever, the bedroom should be a place of rest and quiet. And often it isn't if there's a screen in the room because screens are stimulating. So...
Well, and that kind of, and maybe this is what you were answering as well, but I mean, I think for teens, and technology, as you know, if you've got a child that is going into their adolescent years, how should parents adjust the rules that they may have had when they were just dealing with a young child to now that they're in their teenage years when it comes to technology? What advice can you offer them specifically for those parents who have children that are teenagers?
Yeah. So first, talk with your teen about their tech use. Take an interest. Ask your kids what they enjoy doing online. And try your best to listen without judgment, right? Who are their favorite YouTubers or Instagram influencers? Why do they like them? How does it make them feel when they see their posts? Or if it's video games, what are they playing? Are they playing and interacting with their friends or strangers or no one? So there's a fantastic new book that I've been recommending called Parenting in the Screen Age, A Guide for Calm Conversations. And it's by Dr. Delaney Rustin, who's the creator of the movie Screenagers. And she actually gives a lot of sample questions that you can use to stimulate discussion with your teenager about technology and how they're using it and how it might be impacting them. And next, give your teen some credit for knowing that their tech use comes with a whole host of problems, and then show them some practical strategies like we've already talked about for managing their tech, like how to turn off alerts on their phone. Encourage them to remove social media apps and games from their phones and only use them on the computer. Encourage them to organize their home screen so only productivity apps and tools are there. And here's a novel idea. Encourage them to stop taking and posting so many pictures that are not necessary because, when you post a picture, what are you going to do? You're going to look for the response. You're going to look for the like. You're going to watch for the alerts so that you'll look at your social media more. So I would talk to them about minimizing that as well. And like Roxanne, like you said earlier, teach your kids to use that screen time app and pay attention to monitoring their own use so that they can start to make some adjustments really for themselves, because they're going to have to take charge of that eventually when they leave your home.
Absolutely. I mean, I just, that notion of self-awareness, I mean, with screen time, and even just like, thinking about just because I could text this person doesn't mean I need to text this person. I mean, all day long there is going to be millions of people, coming in. And I have this conversation with teens all the time. You're involved in all these different loops and strings and stories and chats. And are they all really important people? Are they all feeding you? And, just because you could respond doesn't necessarily mean you should. And to just kind of have that moment to moment real time awareness of self is this really what I need to be doing or want to be doing? Am I growing in doing it? Or is this just kind of a waste of space, a waste of time? And, but I love the listen without judgment and inquire and ask. That's something that, we don't always think to do, to just kind of tap into our kids' universe for a little while, because we do have to relate to them a little bit. And I just wanted to, I know there was an email question that came in, and I think you touched on this a little bit ago, and I want to get back to that last question, but we had a writer that asked about a 3-year-old, and saying that, she knows that, the phone may not be the best thing to do, but, she sees that sometimes it helps her 3-year-old, and other times, she can kind of sort of see these mood changes, so is there an appropriate amount of time, a relatively healthy amount of time for that age where you can give a phone or an iPad and it won't end up hurting them?
Yeah. So I would not recommend a personal device for a 3-year-old. I would prefer a parent co-view with their child, maybe a TV show, and even sit with them if they're going to play a little educational video game, but they do that together. I think we've all seen the toddler in the grocery store, at church, or wherever, in our own homes, throw the temper tantrum when the device is taken away. It is, I think, too stimulating for a young child. And we know it pacifies them. Right. There's a device that you used to be able to buy on Amazon. I don't know if it's still there. It's the iPotty, and it has an iPad attachment for a potty seat, so that you can toilet train your child and, keep them on that potty with an iPad. So we know the pacifying effect it has. And I have to challenge parents with, is that how you want your child to learn to regulate? Because guess what? They won't learn to regulate. Right. You want them to internally regulate. So I would pick up a book.
Dr. Randa, we only have about, I think, 40 seconds, to be honest with you. But I had a quick question to ask you. Snapchat, TikTok, thoughts on when you would allow your children, what is an appropriate age for those for children?
Can we avoid it altogether? Can we avoid Snapchat altogether?
Yeah, I wish we could. TikTok, it's entertainment. So, again, as late as possible. Snapchat is challenging because kids are using that instead of texting apps. So, once your kid is needing to communicate with their friends that way, or they will be left out. But again, delay as long as possible, and be aware and talk with your kid that Snapchat is not just for texting, but there is a discovery section in Snapchat. I alluded to it earlier. There's all kinds of softcore porn in that. And so it's basically like magazine covers that are embedded in the app, and kids can scroll through that. There's no way to put parental controls there. So if they're gonna use it, you need to start talking to your kids about good pictures, bad pictures, and the impact of pornography on health. That's my opinion. Wow.
Dr. Anderson, I know I rushed you on that, but I thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are up against our next show that's here. But we thank you as always for being part of our show. Your words are so great, and encouragement as well. I do want to once again remind all of you that if you are not receiving our daily inspirational messages, do so by going to our website at thelouhs.com, LOUHS.com, and click on that subscribe button. You can find out more about the great work that Dr. Randa Anderson is doing with Ocamper by going to their website at Ocamper, OCAMPR.org. And we want to thank Matushka Trudy for once again producing our great show tonight. If you've enjoyed our show, please tell your friends about our show and join us next Tuesday for another exciting show of Live with the Louhs that you don't want to miss. God bless you all, and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan.